Welcome everybody. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Always a pleasure to talk with our lovely community. So glad that you're here. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Happy Friday. It is the beginning of the weekend, Friday night. And on top of that, it is the holiday season here in December, and it's nicer weather than we normally get in December in New York City, and that's pretty decent. And yeah, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Plenty that we can talk about here tonight. Good times. So glad to be here engaging with all of you. The way it works on this show, if you're not familiar, is I give my opening remarks. Then after that, I do the roll call where I call you out as I see you. Names and locations, capitalism to neo-feudalism, and from there, I answer your super chat questions for the rest of the night. That's how we work. Is I answer your super chat questions for the rest of the night. Give my opening remarks first, then the roll call, then the super chat questions. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Good times, folks. So glad to be able to talk with all of you. So I will just kind of jump into my opening remarks, keep the super chats rolling in. Good stuff. Welcome, everybody. You may or may not be aware, but a lot has been happening in the world lately. We in the United States, we are seeing an ongoing state of societal collapse. The economy is tumbling and spiraling in a negative direction with inflation, with rising living costs and people hungry and desperate. The economy is supposed to be getting better now that the pandemic is over, but that is not what is happening. There's a lot of suffering out on the streets. There's a lot of unrest. There's talk of new lockdowns. There's talk of new vaccine requirements. There's rising anger at Joe Biden and his incompetence. They're already on CNN talking about who will replace Joe Biden. And that is all the backdrop for a big shift in international events. We recently saw the Bolivarian alternative for Latin America. The socialist and anti-imperialist forces of Latin America gathered in Cuba for a very important summit to denounce American imperialism, to talk about raising living standards. The ALBA Bank, right? The Bolivarian alternative for Latin America. It's called ALBA. They have this bank that was set up, and it is an alternative development project for Latin America. Meanwhile, at the same time, China continues to roll ahead with its economy and stand up to U.S. threats and hostility. Meanwhile, the USA is trying to play up the idea that somehow Russia is a threat, alleging that Russian troops are amassing on the border and they're about to invade Ukraine, when that's actually not the case. In fact, the escalation is coming from the United States, and it's coming from the NATO countries that are, currently backing the government in Kiev, the government that's linked to extremist forces like the Azov Battalion, the government in Kiev that is using drones, Turkish-made drones, against its own population and killing people in the eastern regions. The Western powers that are moving their forces and threatening to expand NATO eastward, closer to Russia. That's where the aggression is coming from. The allegation is that maybe Russia is moving its troops around inside of Russia, but that is again not a crime. Russia is allowed to move its own troops around within its own country, and the idea that Russia is planning some diabolical invasion of Ukraine is absurd. What's the reality of the situation is the constant threats that are coming from the West and from the Kiev government and from the right-wing extremists who are threatening the Kiev government and forcing its hand, demanding that it be more and more anti-Russian. We have a situation where RT Deutsch, the German RT, was taken down from YouTube. The version of RT News for Germany was taken down from YouTube immediately. The situation is not good. And you can look at how the natural gas prices and the demand for natural gas is going to be rising in Western Europe this winter. It's going to be a cold winter, and the price of natural gas has a lot to do with this situation. They don't like the amount of influence that Russia has over the global natural gas markets. I wrote a whole book, Oil and the Global Capitalist Crisis, where they really can't stand the fact that Russia is a big part of the oil and natural gas markets internationally. And that they have to bargain with Russia to control the price of oil and natural gas. They don't like that. They want to have total dominance over the energy markets, and Russia is a big competitor in the energy markets. And that's one of the main reasons they don't like Russia. That is what you need to understand. Every ounce of natural gas that Russia sells, every barrel of oil that Russia sells is an ounce of gas or a barrel of oil that someone didn't buy from Wall Street, from the big four super major oil companies, ExxonMobil, BP, Shell, and Chevron, from the fracking companies in the United States. Russia is an economic competitor. And the reason that Russia is an economic competitor is because after the fall of the Soviet Union, when Russia's economy collapsed, when they implemented free market capitalism, and it destroyed Russia, right? Boris Yeltsin's free market policies destroyed Russia. In the 90s, Russia was suffering economically, impoverished. It was just a disaster. People were dying. People were fleeing the country. The drug gangs were expanding. Organized crime was rising. Suicide was through the roof. It was a nightmare in the 1990s. The shock therapy economics imposed on Russia. You can read what Naomi Klein wrote about it in her book, The Shock Doctrine. You can read about it in Philip Thayer's book, Europe Since 1989. Free market capitalism was a disaster in Russia during the 1990s. And then from there, you'll notice that Putin came in and he restructured the Russian economy to be centered around two state-controlled energy companies, Gazprom and Rosneft, an oil company run by the state and a natural gas company run by the state. And with the restructuring of the Russian economy around state-controlled energy resources, kind of, making the Russian economy almost similar to what the Ba'ath countries had done with their oil and what Iran had done with its oil, what Venezuela was starting to do with its oil, where you have oil that is a source of state revenue, and that state revenue can then subsidize the other industries and subsidize the rest of the economy. Because Russia moved to what you might call petro-socialism, right? A state-controlled economy centered around public-controlled energy, right? Because Russia moved toward that system of having, reasserting state control over the economy. Because of that, the United States hates Russia, right? And you can recall what happened where, the U.S.-aligned regime in Georgia attacked South Ossetia, and then Russia responded and responded to that. And we were told in 2008, oh my God, Russian aggression. Well, no, it's actually U.S.-backed Georgian aggression that sparked the whole thing. Then you had in 2014, you had the situation where the United States overthrew the elected government of Ukraine, toppled the elected Ukrainian government, and installed a government that was, aligned with far right-wing militias in Kiev. And ever since then, the people in the Eastern republics have been asserting their independence and saying they want to be recognized. And the Minsk agreement that was signed hasn't been followed through. There was a peace agreement, the Minsk agreement, that was reached, in which it was understood the government of Ukraine would recognize the rights of their own population. They didn't do it. They haven't fulfilled the Minsk agreement. That's the next thing that has gone wrong. In addition to that, you saw recently the socialist government of Belarus, where Alexander Lukashenko and presides over an economy. They never had privatizations. They weren't they did not implement the free market reforms after the fall of the Soviet Union. The Communist Party is still the biggest political party. Belarus had an election, and the United States doesn't like Alexander Lukashenko and the government of Belarus. They want free market reforms, vaccine mandates. They want free market reforms in They want free market reforms in Belarus. They want privatizations. And because Alexander Lukashenko won the elections, the USA staged all kinds of destabilization and riots and protests in Belarus and tried to overthrow the government of Belarus. And Belarus is right on Russia's border, and Ukraine is right on Russia's border, and South Ossetia is right on Russia's border. These are all places where the United States has fomented, insurgencies. Meanwhile, if you look at the United States, is Russia stirring up instability and chaos in Mexico? No. Is the United States, or is Russia stirring up chaos and instability in Canada? No. It's like, who's the aggressor here? I'm sorry. Belarus is right next to Russia. The United States is destabilizing Belarus, trying to bring down the government there. You look at Ukraine, that's right next to Russia. The United States did bring down the government and started a big, civil war, and is now backing a government that is killing its population with Turkish-made drones. I think we know who the aggressor is. China's collapse. Right. Why? Western. Wrote it down. But I think we know who the aggressor here is. And the same thing can go for China, right? When you talk about, the USA is always complaining about China's presence and activities in the South China Sea. Well, I'm sorry, who's closer to the South China Sea, the United States or China? One of these places they're concerned about instability is Taiwan. Well, Taiwan is China. Taiwan is China. It has been China for thousands of years. I mean, it's never been an independent country. And on top of that, China is concerned about the USA preventing their oil from coming, on oil tankers in the South China Sea. And it's the United States that grabbed the CFO of Huawei Technologies, one of the most important companies in China, the largest telecommunications manufacturer in the world. It was the United States that grabbed the CFO, Meng, in Canada and tried to, send her to the United States to face criminal charges. And held, the CFO of Huawei in the United States. Now she eventually, or in Canada, and she eventually, got returned to Canada, but the USA grabbed her. And it's the United States that has had a democracy summit accusing China of being undemocratic somehow, and ridiculous situation. It's the United States that has been militarily backing the forces in Taiwan. And trying to, some assert there may even be U.S. funding and support for separatist forces that want to declare that Taiwan is not China. And the USA fomented riots in Hong Kong for months. For months, we saw the rioting where the U.S.-backed NGOs and U.S. forces were in Hong Kong working with the local population there to kill police officers, to beat people up, to light people on fire. All kinds of unrest was staged by CIA and U.S. government forces in Hong Kong for months and months and months. Hong Kong is part of China, and the Chinese government was basically waging an all-out war against instability and unrest fomented by the United States among the rich kids of Hong Kong, and it went on for months and months and months. The USA has tried to play up the idea that the Uyghur regions are being subjected to genocide, even though that hasn't added up. And now they've shifted the story. Now it's a cultural genocide. It's not actually killing people, because their story about millions of people being killed didn't add up. So now it's just their culture. But yet, the Chinese government is paying for mosques and is paying for seminaries, and that's not true either, right? And we see China is being attacked. It's being attacked in the Uyghur regions by the United States. It's being attacked in Hong Kong by the United States. It's being attacked in Taiwan by the United States. The USA is, in the South China Sea, threatening China's ability to import its oil. The USA grabs the CFO of Huawei Technologies and holds her in Canada. But somehow, the USA would have you believe that China is the aggressor. That's what they would have you believe. They believe somehow China is the aggressor. China is simply not the aggressor. The aggressor is the United States, and that's clearly the case. Russia has 8 overseas military bases. China has 1 overseas military base in Djibouti, and the United States has well over 800 overseas military bases. That is just the reality of the situation. The idea, that somehow, Russia or China are aggressive countries that are threatening world peace is utterly absurd. It's utterly absurd. It just doesn't match the reality of the situation. And that's all there is to it. So there we go. Someone's telling me I should unmod someone. Unmod. Okay. Who should I unmod? Who am I unmodding? I should unmod someone. Okay. 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 Who am I? Okay. Well, if I see him post something, I can unmod him. I don't know. I have to see him post something. That's really bizarre. That is very, very bizarre. It's extremely bizarre. He's muting half the chat. That's awful. That's really, really awful. I don't even know what's going on there. I don't ever recall modding anyone named William Kane. Okay, how do we resolve this? I don't recall ever modding anyone by that name. I did see a bunch of like stuff going by, like it was being, you know, okay. This is very bizarre. All right. There we go. If I see William Kane come up, I can unmod him. That's odd. Very odd. But hey, we just got to keep going. That's what I do. We've been raided before in our chat, right? We've had, I think, what is it? Sticks and Hammer brought all of his people in to clank, clank, clank. You know, click on the three dots to find him in participants. Okay, so I clicked on the three dots. All right. Save and highlight, share, and mute microphone. That doesn't say participants. So there we go. There we go. Don't see him. I don't know how this works. Oh, is it this one? No. That's effects. Okay. But we've survived stuff here before, folks, and we're not gonna surrender. We're just gonna keep going. And that's how this works. I mean, we're gonna survive. We're gonna get through this. So, if this William Kane comes up, I'll unmod him. But whatever, we'll survive. Yeah, we'll survive, folks. I mean, we've been through a lot of things before, and there we go. So now remove moderator. All right, I just removed William Kane as a moderator. Is that solving our problems? So there we go. All righty. All right, very good. But anyway, as we were saying before things got weird in the chat, I try to just generally ignore the chat when I'm talking. I'm just telling you, and as general, then people were calling on me to do something. Yeah, so, yeah, whatever. All right, life goes on. I don't know what that was about. That was sketch, but, life happens. But anyway, as I was saying, this idea that Russia and China are the aggressors, this idea that somehow the United States is being victimized by Russia and China, that we should be worried about the Chinese threat or the Russian threat is ridiculously absurd. Meanwhile, if you look across the United States right now, we are seeing the reality of capitalism in decay. Now, there is an economic crisis. There's an economic crisis going on, and it needs to be resolved. And people are suffering, and they need an economic program. And in order to make sure that the people don't come together and fight for their economic rights, the ruling class of the United States has hit us with a double whammy. Two punches they've hit us with. The first punch they hit us with is libertarianism. Libertarianism is a toxic ideology. And libertarianism says, well, the problem isn't capitalism. The problem is we don't have real capitalism. It's not real capitalism. If we just privatize everything, if we just get rid of all the social programs, if we just, implement extreme, crazy libertarian policies, that'll cause economic growth. And people believe this. It's very widespread. And I saw it coming a mile away. I saw this coming. I remember 2008, the financial crisis happened. I've told this story many times before, but it bears repeating because it's so damn important. 2008, you'll remember, that was the year Barack Obama got elected president. Back in the day, back in my day, it seems like 100 years ago, but 2008, Barack Obama was being elected president. And I was a college student, and I noticed all of a sudden all kinds of people woke up. They woke up. They started to question the wars. All these people who've been blind supporters of the war in Iraq, all these people who've been big supporters of U.S. government torture and spying and all kinds of things, all kinds of people, who had been just, true believers in American capitalism, suddenly started questioning things. But they questioned them wrong. They started saying, oh, well, the problem is we don't have real capitalism. And the problem is that the U.S. government is communist. And all these conservatives, instead of becoming, socialists and anti-imperialists, they were becoming libertarians. And they were joining the Tea Party. And they liked Ron Paul. Everyone loved Ron Paul. Ron Paul. He's the true conservative, Ron Paul. And I went to the communist groups I was working with, and I said, this is a problem. This is a very big problem. We need to debate these people. We need to expose libertarianism is not correct. And they said, no, we'll just build the movement. And they had no interest in doing it, right? Because that's the way these communist groups tend to operate. They just tail after whatever the liberals are doing. And they did not want to engage in ideological combat against the menace of libertarianism. And so these libertarian ideas got very widespread. And it's very funny because these are the same people now that are all upset about the alt-right. Well, when this was getting started, I warned them about the danger of libertarianism, about the danger of these, and libertarianism, they talk about it's a pipeline. That first it was the new atheist movement, and then after that it was libertarianism, and then after that comes racial pseudoscience and the alt-right. And a lot of the folks that are now alt-right, now all of them, they started out generally with this libertarian stuff. And libertarianism is wrong. It's a wrong ideology. Is there a compromise position between very good. Wrote it down. And I said we need to refute this. Libertarianism is bullshit economics. It's the idea that somehow you can cut your way into economic growth. It is completely wrong in terms of economics, but no one is standing up to it. The left didn't want to talk about it. They wanted to focus on cultural issues. They wanted to focus on supporting whatever the Democrats are doing, and they didn't stand up to libertarianism. And it became a big problem. And, the alt-right is the inheritor of libertarianism. Alex Jones, who was big with the libertarian folks, he's now, on the right. He's now a Trumper, and that, what you can call, the new right. I wouldn't call it the alt-right. Alt-right is white supremacists. That's, Richard Spencer. That's like white nationalist, white supremacist kind of people, David Duke kind of people. That's a very obscure grouping. It's a very, very obscure grouping. But the modern new right, I guess you could call it, the Tim Pool fan base, the Alex Jones fan base, those people are a result of libertarianism. The fact that in the aftermath of the financial crisis, all of these toxic libertarian ideas went everywhere, and nobody stood up to libertarianism and Marxism. I did my best. You can watch a debate. You can actually watch a debate that I did in 2008, the year that Barack Obama ran for president. You can watch a debate between me and a libertarian on my college campus. I debated a libertarian. And I don't know, watch it for yourself. But I think I pretty thoroughly destroyed him. I had a debate with him. And I'm glad I did it. Every communist should have been doing that back then, but that's what I did. I gave my energy, to debating this libertarian, and it was worth my time. And I was saying to the rest of the organization, why don't they do this? And they didn't want to do it. Oh, no. We just got to build the movement, man. Build the movement, man. Protest, protest, build the movement, protest. So all of this alt-right stuff, January 6th, QAnon, all of that is the result of the communist parties tailing after the Democrats and refusing to confront libertarians. Now, the next punch we've gotten in the face, so we got the first punch in the face, libertarianism. The second punch we got in the face is the synthetic left. And synthetic leftism is not Marxism. It is this belief that I don't even know that economic growth is bad. That's one of their central beliefs. That economic growth is somehow bad, right? We can't have economic growth because people have too much stuff. We need to go back to nature. We need mass destruction, chaos and destruction to return nature to balance. That average Americans are evil because they don't realize their white privilege or their male privilege or their I don't even know what they somehow they don't realize that they have it too good. They don't feel ashamed of themselves enough, and so average people are the enemy. And we need to drive down living standards to deal with the average Americans that just aren't good enough. And we need to shame average Americans, and we need to focus on cultural issues. We need to focus on on sexual freedom. We need to focus on abortion. We need to focus on anything. We can't talk about class struggle. And if you actually do believe in Marxism, you're a Nazi. If you believe in Marxism somehow, that makes you a Nazi. If you believe in Marxism, if you want the workers to control the means of production, that's Nazi, because all we are allowed to ever want is, worker cooperatives in the woods and less is better and all of that, right? This is the synthetic left. So they hit us once with libertarianism, this erratic belief in free markets, this irrational belief in the nobility of capitalism and free markets, etc. And then they hit us again with the synthetic left. And the synthetic left is anti-communism dressed up as socialism. It's pessimistic Malthusianism. It's destructive ideology. It's sexual politics. It's sexual libidinal drives dressed up as politics. It's giving people permission to unleash their impulses. It's not building political infrastructure in communities. It's just giving people permission to unleash their rage, giving people permission to feel like they've suffered and just unleash their rage. And ultimately, it's about tearing things down to clear the world so that nothing stands in the way of the ultra monopolies, right? It's about fomenting enough chaos that the monopoly of the ultra rich can be secured. It's Malthusian destructive pessimism, and that's the synthetic left. So we've been hit with libertarianism. We've been hit with the synthetic left, and those are the things that are there to make sure, that will make sure that we, to try and prevent Americans from organizing for their rights. Because right now, the moment cries out for a class struggle economic program. Overwhelmingly, that's what it cries out for. It cries out for the people of the United States to come together and demand jobs and housing and healthcare and education and call for dismantling the global capitalist system and fighting for the working class to seize control of the means of production. That's what it calls out for. It's just common sense. Socialism is just the common sense response to the moment. Right. All right. Synthetic left in COVID culture. So that's just the moment. The moment cries out for class struggle organizing and for people to build communities and care for each other and support each other, build communities of solidarity while demanding a government of action that fights for working families and demanding that the state take power on behalf of the people and beat back the power of the big corporations and banks, right? That's what the moment cries out for. And there is a desperate attempt to keep us from doing that. And just like the synthetic left covered for the libertarians, refused to debate them because, we just build the movement, man. And just like the communist groups now just tail after and have basically dissolved into the synthetic left, they don't really know what they believe in anymore at the end of the day. You look at a lot of these groups, the Workers' World Party, the Communist Party, the Party of Socialism and Liberation, they don't even know what they believe in anymore, right? The synthetic left politics has just engulfed them to the point they've forgotten their own ideology. You corner one of the leaders, of one of these parties and ask them basic questions about communism and what about the Soviet Union and they can't answer them. I saw this at Occupy Wall Street. They couldn't answer those questions. Occupy Wall Street people would ask, they don't even know what they believe, right? The synthetic left stuff has just swallowed into these groups. They don't even know what they believe in. So now the only way to get done what needs to be done is out of the movement to the masses. We need to go to average Americans with our program. with an economic program to fight for a government of action that will fight for working families, to call for moving towards socialism, to expose how imperialism is bad for the American working class, how racism is bad for the American working class. That's what we need more than anything. And the only way to do it is to get out of the movement and get to the masses. And we have to build something new. And that's why I'm building a think tank. I'm not building a party. I'm building the Center for Political Innovation, a think tank that will try and develop policy solutions. That's what we're trying to do. And we're doing it. And right now, the John Brown Volunteers are in Texas. They're doing great work with San Angelo Solidarity, with other forces in Texas. They're doing amazing stuff. You can send them a donation right here if you want to, there's a link to give them a donation. You can shoot them a donation. That would be great to support the work that we're doing. And a lot of other amazing things are happening. I just had a great Zoom call with Center for Political Innovation Australia. A group of people in Australia are looking to set up the Center for Political Innovation of Australia. And we just had a really long Zoom call. David Fox was on there. Helen Woolley was on there. Some others were on. It was amazing. It was utterly, utterly amazing. Just amazing, amazing stuff. It was really, really great to see that there's people in Australia who have the exact same understanding that we have. They have the exact same grievances against the synthetic left that we have. They see the exact same problems. They're anti-imperialist. They see the anti-China hysteria in Australia, and they're organizing there. Great. Tomorrow night, there's going to be a web conference for Students and Youth for a New America, which is on the campuses. They're in Washington, D.C. area. They're in Illinois. They're in Texas, and they are a youth organization that is aligned with the Center for Political Innovation, Students and Youth for a New America. And they are going to be having a web conference, and they have people around the country, and they've been postering for Alex Saab, and they've been doing great activism themselves, Students and Youth for a New America. And, Center for Political Innovation Chicago is getting organized and doing great stuff. We're trying to set up a chapter in Washington State. We're at this point we have people everywhere. I mean, it's happening. We're really doing great stuff. I mean, it's really, really kind of amazing. The California State Organizing Committee, the Center for Political Innovation. We had a California conference there a few months with a lot of people. The Convo Couch, great YouTube channel, were there. This is all happening. It's really out of the blue. All of a sudden, we are a serious political force. That's why, by the way, people want to comment on us. If we didn't matter, if we were irrelevant, people wouldn't be attacking us so much. But the Center for Political Innovation is on fire. We have a huge amount of energy. We are moving ahead. We are marching forward. This is turning into something for real. And, you can be part of it. You can be part of it. You can come with me on this journey, or you can not, and that's up to you, right? You can make your own decision. But something is really, really happening. Whether it's Southern California, whether it's in Chicago, whether it's in the D.C. area, whether it's in Texas. This is really great stuff. The John Brown Volunteers are doing their great work in Texas. You can shoot them a contribution. Link below. That'd be the quickest way for us to get a contribution, is if you were to hit the link below, PayPal it to us. But we're doing great stuff, and I'm heading out to Texas March 15th. I'm going to be speaking at an event in Texas, and that's going to be great. We're having a national gathering. We're going to be having a national gathering. Let me repeat that: a national gathering is happening on the 22nd of June, from 22nd of June to the 26th of June. We're doing that, and it's going to be amazing. And this is great. It's a really, really great time to be alive. It really, really is. There's a lot of hope going on. I am thankful that I'm alive right now. And it can be hard times. We look at what's happening in the country right now. We look at how many people are struggling and suffering. We look at the rising police state. We look at everything that's happening, and there's part of us that just says, no, this is so awful. But we have to take a deep breath. So just take a deep breath with me. When I'm blowing out, what is it? See, even me, I'm all hyped up. I take a deep breath, blow out. We are living in the last days of American capitalism and imperialism. We are living in the last days. The last days. These are the last days of American capitalism and imperialism. The last days. This is the end. William Z. Foster would be jealous of us because he died before American capitalism could be overthrown. The Black Panthers would be jealous of us because they died and their organization was crushed before this time. You know, Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, Eugene Debs, the Wobblies, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, all the great revolutionaries of the past would be jealous of us if they knew what was going around, because these are the last days. These are the last days. These are the last days. This is capitalism in decay. Mao is coming down from the mountain. A does not equal A, and you never step into the same river twice. And we are living in the last days of American imperialism. We are living in a moment where we actually have the opportunity to take power. Guevara said that revolution is not an apple that just naturally falls from the tree. You have to make it fall. And he's right, right? Revolutions don't just happen all by themselves. In order to have a revolution, you have to have three main ingredients. You have to have a major crisis in society, a crisis so big that many in the ruling class are fighting among each other. And then there have to be mass rebellions among the people. And then there has to be a revolutionary party capable of transforming those mass rebellions into a fight for socialism. That's what you need to have socialism. You need to have those three steps. And right now, we do have a mass crisis in society. And that crisis is intensifying. And it's going to continue intensifying. And it's rooted in the computer revolution. It's rooted in the problem of overproduction. Right? It's rooted in the fact that they don't need workers at the assembly line. They're demolishing the labor aristocracy. There's, more goods being produced than ever before. And, the population has expanded while the need for productive workers has decreased. Capitalism basically has no room for the proletariat, right? There's no room for the workers in the global assembly line. This is the problem of overproduction. Poverty amid plenty. Production under consumption. The natural built-in problem of capitalism that Marx predicted. This is what we're living under, and it's spurning a society-wide crisis, and there's fights in the ruling class, etc. So we have that. Number two, mass rebellions among the people. We don't have that, right? We have protests, we have people going out and breaking stuff, but that's not all that it is, right? The people are going to start caring for each other. They're going to start forming organizations among themselves. We're going to see more criminal organizations that will develop. We're going to see more kind of spontaneous community associations. When I was in Detroit, in 2008, there was a lot. They were starting where they would put people back into their homes. When they would, a person would get evicted from their home, the community would come and they would break the lock and they would put all their stuff back in, right? And that's happening in different parts of the country now. That started in Detroit in 2008. It was pretty edgy. We were doing that. It was illegal. But, we were breaking the locks and putting stuff back into people's homes and stopping evictions, right? And, so that was happening. But now that happens all across the country. All across the country that happens. People stop evictions. That's happening all across the country. There's spontaneous resistance to evictions. That's happening. In addition to that, there's community food banks and mutual aid programs that are springing up. The people are responding naturally to the crisis. As Mao says in the Little Red Book, where there is oppression, there is resistance. However, the resistance is not #revolution. It's not simply people going out and breaking stuff in the street. Not that there's never room for people to, have, militant protests or whatever. I'm not against that. I participated in that, many times. But that in and of itself won't lead to socialism. It is the organizations of the people that are emerging to address the crisis that are laying the basis for it, right? And it's those community assemblies, those mutual aid groups, those are the things that lay the basis for the fight. And so that is, when we talk about the second thing, about there need to be rebellions among the people, that's what we're talking about. Marx in the Communist Manifesto, he talks about how the workers form combinations, right? And those community associations that are being formed right now, those mutual aid groups, all of that is the combinations are being formed. So we got step number one, that's pretty well intact. We're deep into a crisis. Step number two, though, we're starting to see maybe the beginning of rebellions among the people. The disorganized, social media staged stuff, that's not rebellions among the people. Right? Ferguson, Missouri, that was a rebellion among the people. Some of the strikes that have gone on, some of the more militant strikes that have gone on, that was resistance among the people. But we're at the beginning of maybe starting to see resistance among the people. The people are forming organizations, and those organizations can step up and become active in moments. We're just beginning to see that. And number three, a revolutionary organization that can transform, the resistance of the people into a fight for socialism. We don't have that at all. We don't have that. We don't have that at all. Many of those organizations, many of the organizations that exist, these kind of spontaneous organizations, they get swept up by synthetic left ideology, or they get swept up by the right. Let's be real, there is resistance in parts of the country that are largely white or largely conservative, and so the resistance may be spontaneous. They may be fighting against the police state. They may be fighting against big corporations, but because they're in a conservative area, they'll be swept up by the right, right? That if there's no ideology, if there is no ideology, there is no revolutionary movement. Vladimir Lenin wrote a very, very important book called What Is to Be Done? And it's very difficult to read. It is not an easy read because it references all kinds of newspapers with Russian names that haven't been around for 100 years. It's a very difficult book. But I would encourage you, if you want to understand why we're doing what we're doing and why the Center for Political Innovation is important and why we need to act the way we act and why we need to say the things we say, you should go and read What Is to Be Done. Go and read What Is to Be Done. Now, if you want to really get the most out of What Is to Be Done, the best advice I ever got from reading What Is to Be Done is to read it backwards. Read the final chapter first, and then read the previous chapter, and then read the previous chapter, and then read the previous chapter, and then read the previous chapter. Read the chapters in backward order, right? Because the way it's written, he talks about a very specific argument, and then he expands, and then he expands, and then he expands, and then he expands, and then he expands. And the final chapter of the book is the entire history of the Russian Social Democratic labor movement, right? The whole entire history of Marxism in Russia. So if you start out with the entire history, and then you read about the terrorist debate, the debate about why terrorism is not good, and then you read about bowing to spontaneity, and then it makes sense, right? And in What Is to Be Done, Vladimir Lenin pitches his idea of the party of new type that engages in agitation and propaganda. And in What Is to Be Done, Vladimir Lenin lays out his theory of, I don't know who that is. I don't know who that is, Jay Grimes. I just don't know who that is. In What Is to Be Done, Lenin, lays out his concept of, why bowing to spontaneity and tailism is not correct. And if you read What Is to Be Done, now, that book is very out of date. I'll tell you that much. I think that's, for example, democratic centralism hasn't worked out very well in the United States over the last few decades. It's resulted in kind of a crisis. There's this formula for forming a party in there where you have democratic centralism, and you come up with a newspaper that is the collective organizer, and you go out and sell that newspaper, and yeah, that's 100 years old, right? And it's also very Russian. It was written for Russia in 1903. So not everything you'll read in What Is to Be Done is necessarily correct, but but it'll give you an understanding of how a revolutionary thinks. And one of the most important passages in What Is to Be Done is the part where he's arguing against what he calls bowing to spontaneity or tailism, and how basically when the masses of Russia would have a spontaneous rebellion, the Marxists would just run up behind it and say, "Oh yeah, we support you," and just tail after it, right? And that's not offering leadership. The job of the Revolutionary Party is to offer leadership. He has even like a fictional dialogue that he's written between a striking worker and a Marxist. And the striking worker keeps saying to the Marxist, "Tell me something I don't know. Tell me something I don't know." Right? The Marxist is saying, "Yeah, you're oppressed by your boss. It's awful." And the worker's saying, "Tell me something I don't know. Oh, these conditions you're facing are awful. Tell me something I don't know. Oh, these capitalists don't care about you and they run the government. Tell me something I don't know." Right? The job of the Revolutionary Party is not to tell workers what they already know. It's to tell them something they don't know. Right? It's to point them a way out. Right? The Communist Party of the United States. The slogan that they used for their presidential election campaign in 1932 was "For a revolutionary way out of the crisis." And then in 1940, they ran a presidential campaign, and their slogan was "The way out." The way out, right? The job of the revolutionary is to point the way out. The way out. We should be pointing a new direction, right? The system's going one way and we're going another way. That is our understanding. That is what needs to be done. is, there needs to be a new trajectory, a new direction put. And if you just go to the working class and you just, tail after their general feeling, you're not going to change anything. Plus, those sentiments are going to be hijacked by the old system, and they won't lead to anything revolutionary. And so it is our job to go to the masses and engage with them, right? And it is our job to point them in a new direction. I often quote the very final section of the Communist Manifesto, where Karl Marx says, communists everywhere, communists never conceal their political views. Communists everywhere support every rebellion against the existing order of things, but in all of them, they raise the property question. Wherever there is an uprising among the masses against the existing order of things, communists go there and raise the property question. And if you just tail after it and pretend to support it, you're not raising the property question. And if you just attack it and you say, oh, it's right wing, it's, and then you're not raising the property question. Wherever there are people in your society who don't have peace with the system and are at odds with the prevailing system and are rebelling against it, it is the communist duty to go to those people and raise the property question, not tail after them, not spit on them because they're doing it in a right-wing way, but in all cases, raise the property question. And the way you raise the property question is by putting forward your program, by explaining how things could change, right? For example, right? Somebody is upset about the situation. We say, we want to rebuild the United States with a mass infrastructure program. We want to put natural gas and oil under public ownership. Banking and the lending of money should be in the hands of the state and done strategically at a community level, local level, federal level. The lending of money should be, done for the community overall. Plus, we should enact an economic bill of rights, the right to a job, the right to housing, the right to education. We want to solve the problem of climate change by building Fusion City, a big, and having a global combined effort to defeat fossil fuels and get new energy. Plus, on top of that, we want to resolve the problems facing Latin America and Central America with the Sandino-Zapata economic corridor, a corridor of economic development. That's how we want to resolve these problems, and that is the way that you raise the property question. Is you explain what could be done, and you rally people around what could actually be done to resolve the price. What critiques could be made of Stalin's on the national question? Okay. All right. So there you go. So, that's really what I wanted to communicate to you all in my opening remarks. I will tell you, and I've told this story before, but it bears repeating because this kind of work can be a little bit stressful at times, and I got to tell you, it's weird. Ever since the John Brown Volunteers started, I've been a lot busier than I've ever been, right? Because managing a group of people that are full-time, this is their whole life, this is their doing it every day is not an easy task, right? And making sure they have the resources they need to keep going and all of that. And suddenly, since the John Brown Volunteers got going, CPI started speeding ahead way faster. And that shows that, that having cadre, what they call cadre, people that are given their whole life to this, is a changing point, right? You have to have cadre to have a serious organization, right? You can have an association, but when you have a core of people who are doing it full time, that means suddenly you're in business. You're doing the real thing. You're building a real organization. And I keep coming back to this story that Lenin would always tell about when he was walking through the countryside. Lenin would tell the story. He was walking through the countryside, and he and his friend, they looked up at a hill, and they saw this peasant on the hill waving his arms around crazy, and they thought, man, maybe that guy's having an epileptic fit. Maybe that guy has rabies. He's just waving his arms around. And they thought, what is wrong with that peasant up on the hill? He's just waving his arms around. Is he okay? Is he a lunatic? What in the world is he doing? What in the world is that peasant up on the hill doing? But as they got closer, they saw that his actions that looked erratic were in reality very logical, because he wasn't just waving his arms around like a lunatic. He had a knife, and he was sharpening his knife. And that's what the Bolsheviks were doing. The Bolsheviks, they looked like they didn't know what they were doing. They looked crazy. They're running here, they're running there, they're doing this, they're doing that, they're having an argument about this. But in reality, even though it looked crazy, they were sharpening their knives so they could seize power. And that's what the Bolsheviks were doing, right? And that story Lenin told very much explains it. And, sometimes they talk about quality into quantity. This is a Hegelian formula, right? That if you have a book and you just keep ripping pages out of it, it's still a book. It's just missing a few pages. You're just ripping pages out of it, But you're going to reach the point where you rip all the pages out of the book. And if a book has no pages, it is not a book anymore. So all these quality changes have added up into a quantity change, right? And sometimes that happens. Sometimes you have a lot. I've seen this in my own life. I'll tell you, more than anybody, I have seen this in my own life. Things, I do something here and nothing happens. I do something here and nothing happens. I do something here and nothing happens. And then all of a sudden, it's like an avalanche. A bunch of things happen. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Results don't always come at once, right? They don't always come at once. There's dry spells and there's thunderstorms, and that's how life is. But if you're committed to this project, if you're committed to getting us to socialism, you have to be there. You can't just be a summer soldier. During the American Revolution, they talked about the summer soldiers and the winter soldiers. During the American Revolution, there were some soldiers who would fight in the summertime when it was warm weather outside. It was summertime, but then when it started getting cold, they went back to the farm. They didn't want to be part of it. But the best soldiers in the American Revolution were what they called the winter soldiers. And they were the ones that were there in the cold months of the winter, that never abandoned the cause, that were the most committed to it. The winter soldiers. You have to be a winter soldier for this, right? You have to go through periods where you don't see any payout, right? That Lenin story that I've told, about the guy waving his arms, it's a little bit outdated. People don't sharpen knives up on hills out in the countryside anymore. Well, maybe they do, but, I don't. But, it's a little bit outdated. But, there is a prayer. A prayer that Southern Baptists do. And I know I told this like a week ago, but I'm just telling it to you again because it's really important. Right? That Southern Baptists, there's a prayer that goes back hundreds of years. And they say, the prayer, it's like, God, I hate flour. I hate flour. And God, I hate baking soda. I hate baking soda. And God, I hate water. I hate water. And God, I hate shortening. God, I hate shortening. But you put it all together, and I sure love fresh biscuits. Right? And that's the understanding, right? That sometimes the components and the parts are very unlikable. But together, they can add up into something very, very explosive and powerful. And if you look at all that we've achieved in the short time that we're achieving, I don't want us to, and this is one of my concerns, I don't want us to get deluded here, because it's kind of like exercising. I don't know if people know this, but when you first exercise, the first couple months that you're exercising, you see the payout immediately. If you've been not exercising, the first 2-3 months you're exercising, oh my God, your body changes, you lose weight, you gain muscle, and you think, wow, this really works. But after you've been doing it for about a year, you don't start to see that payout anymore, because your body stays about the same, and you're just kind of maintaining where it was. And it's much harder. It takes a lot longer to see any change in your body. And right now we're seeing a huge payout, because we're suddenly in motion, right? But this is just like the beginning of exercising. That's basically the period we're in. We're at the very beginning of exercising. And so, yeah, we've been exercising 2 or 3 months now, and we're blown away by how it's changing. We're gonna, as they say, plateau. There's gonna be periods where we're not gonna see as much of a payout as we're seeing right now. I mean, you wouldn't believe the payout the payout we're seeing right now. Holy crap. I mean, Maduro mentioned us, on television. He mentioned our rally. We're sending delegations to Nicaragua. We're like starting reading groups all across the country. People are joining us. The old synthetic left, the fake, communist groups are freaking out and like giving us free publicity, writing polemics against us. And I mean, everybody, we are the hottest show in town. Right? You cannot beat the Center for Political Innovation. I mean, who else is doing anything like what we're doing right now? But I'm going to tell you that after we've been doing this a couple years, things are probably going to slow down a little bit because, at that point we won't be, the hot new commodity in town. But that's okay. We just got to keep going. We got to keep going. And, if the situation changes in 24 hours, the tactics must also change in 24 hours. Right? You never step into the same river twice. And that's what you have to remember. We have to be constantly reinventing ourselves, constantly approaching the masses in a new and different way, constantly organizing in a different way, constantly meeting new people, winning them over. The moment that we get in a rut and we start doing what we've always done is the moment that we will begin our political death. And we cannot do that, right? We cannot do that. The stakes are getting too high, and political events are moving very rapidly right now. Living standards are dropping. Instability is rising. Our moment is approaching. I mean, the moment for the Center for Political Innovation to expand and shine is rising. And so the work that we do in these coming months is going to be very important. I hope that you're all on the webcast tomorrow for the Students and Youth for a New America. I hope that you all send us a nice contribution for the John Brown Volunteers. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and let's start doing the roll call, names and locations. I'll call you out as I see you, names and locations, and then I'll start answering your super chats. How's that? Names and locations. Who's with us tonight? Who's with us? Who's with us? Who's with us? Names and locations. Ryan in Oakland, Christian in Northern New Jersey, Chaya in Montreal, Lee in County, North Carolina, Micah in Las Vegas, Mike in North Carolina, Don D in NYC, Tristan in Maryland, SoCal, David in China, JT24 in Mississippi, Springfield, Missouri, San Francisco, Sam in Australia, Ash in Chicago, Ryan in Oakland, Cincinnati, Ohio, Southern Illinois, Greenbelt, Maryland, Philippines, Wisconsin, Enoch, Australia, Taiwan, Hong Kong, West Virginia, Michigan, British Columbia, Temple City, Richie Bruce out in Staten Island. Shout out to you, Richie. Dallas, Texas, Khadijah in Brooklyn. Shout out to you, Khadijah. Southern California, Colin in North Carolina, Vinicius from Brazil, Pomona, California, Patrick from Los Angeles, Montgomery, Alabama, Adelaide, Australia, Corona, California, Northern Michigan, David Fox. Shout out to you, David Fox, in Bendigo, Australia. Who else is with us? Ben in Michigan, Fred in Alameda County, Southern Illinois, Brian Schaefer. Welcome, 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 welcome. Isn't that a line from the movie Toy Story? I'm Woody. Howdy, 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 howdy. It stands out in my mind. I think it's a line from the movie Toy Story. Fred in Alameda, California. Luca from Midwest, Madison, Wisconsin, Naples, Florida, Gateshead, England, Istanbul in Texas, Dregs in Texas, Greenville, South Carolina. Welcome, 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 welcome. So much is happening, folks. So much is happening. Nelson in San Antonio, Texas. Joe the Gale, Joe the Red in Nassau County. Shout out to you. Great folks. Great stuff is happening, folks. Great things. Great stuff. So, let me read these super chat questions. The first super chat question that I've been asked to answer has capitalism morphed into neo-feudalism? Well, that raises the question, what is neo-feudalism? Feudalism is a mode of production. It is subsistence farming. It is, the ownership of land in the hands of landowners, landlords. It is, serfs being exploited by gentry. So when you say neo-feudalism, you don't mean actual feudalism. You mean, some kind of modern system that is similar to feudalism. And then that raises the question, how could we have... Some people talk about the debt-based economy, right? And the fact that the serf is in debt. He has debts. He has his debts to the landowner. And so maybe that's somehow a feudalistic thing. But the main reason I would argue that we're not in neo-feudalism is that the way feudalism was held together with very, very firmly implemented social hierarchies. And it held back capitalism in a lot of ways. Capitalism was emerging and feudalism resisted it because feudalism, it's not about making a profit, it's about rigid adherence to, social hierarchies and structures and caste systems, etc. Whereas nowadays, it seems like every tie that binds people to each other, you read the opening of the Communist Manifesto where he's talking about feudalism being torn apart, all the ties that bind man to their natural superiors, all these things are being ripped apart. People don't know who they are anymore. Feudalism, there's this mystical loyalty to your country, mystical loyalty to your king. We don't have any of that, right? Nowadays, people don't even know who they are. People have no idea who they are. They have no idea what they believe in. They have no idea what their life is all about. People are walking through the world going, what's the point of all of this? So, you can argue, and some people may argue that, like, okay, the tech companies, and there's like a social engineering aspect to what they're doing, and okay, maybe, but at the end of the day, it's not feudalism, I'll tell you that much. And the mode of production is definitely not feudalism. And feudalism is tied to a mode of production. It's not, a lot of people think feudalism means kings and queens. It's like, that's not what it means. Have you ever heard of the neo-reactionary right concept of bio-Leninism, which purports to explain communism through evolutionary psychology? Somebody mentioned that to me a long time ago. I'll just answer that now. Somebody mentioned that to me a long time ago in a conversation. And I honestly don't even remember exactly how that concept works, and I didn't even understand it at the time, I couldn't explain that concept because I'm not on the right. And when the person explained it to me at the time, I was just like, huh? Like, I don't know. It struck me. When you talk about an evolutionary thing, it is important to note that in feudalism, there is a trend that is kind of natural in feudal society that's called Melanarianism. And actually, a lot has been written about this in medieval history. But, in feudalism, every 100 years or so, you do have mass rebellions among the population. And the peasants rise up and overthrow the landlords. And people do weird stuff. And people start thinking the second coming of, the end times are happening. And people engage in mass, like, self-mutilation. That's a big thing that would happen. And all throughout feudal society. This happened in China. Every 100 years or so, there'd be a big peasant war or a peasant uprising. There'd be some kind of Christ-like figure mobilizing armies of peasants to overthrow the landlords. There'd be people flogging themselves and whipping themselves, and and that this was a thing. And the Catholic Church wrote about this, and they talked about it, and it happened in China also, and that that was a trend, and that what that was is that was built into the feudal system, which is that feudalism can't expand, right? Under the feudal system, there's no room for expansion. Under capitalism, there's room for growth to some degree until you get to the crisis of overproduction. But there's no room for expansion in feudalism. So eventually feudalism gets into a situation where it can't expand, but the population has expanded, number one. The capacity to produce wealth has expanded, number two. And you get a situation economically created in feudalism where feudalism kind of reaches a breaking point, and so it has to start over again. And so there becomes like a Melanarian revolt. And the Melanarian uprisings that happened throughout Europe, that happened in China, they never led to socialism. They never led to some kind of egalitarian society being created. They just kind of led to tearing apart the old feudal system and kind of laying the basis for things to be rebuilt. And there's a lot written about the peasant wars in Germany and such, and that it wasn't until capitalism emerged as an alternative to feudalism that these peasant uprisings could lead anywhere. And that's one thing that is missing from a lot of people's understanding, is that until there was a new economic structure, a higher mode of production to replace feudalism, rebellions against feudalism never really led any place. They would always be defeated and overturned. So I doubt that these people on the right that are talking about bio-Leninism, I doubt that they are observing that phenomenon. And this is something that I think Elaine Badiou and others talk about when they talk about the idea of communism and the Spartacus slave revolt, and how there's always been a drive for an egalitarian society within the human species. I think that's kind of what they're getting at. But anyway, next super chat question: vaccine mandates. My position is that while I believe in vaccines, and I am vaccinated myself, and I do believe in COVID-19 because I had it at one point, and I mean, I believed in it before that, but I had it, and I think COVID is real. It's not a hoax, and I think the vaccine is not the Illuminati trying to poison you. It's a real thing. The vaccine is real, and it's not killing people. And that said, I am opposed to vaccine mandates because I think it leads to stigmatizing and punishing people that are not vaccinated. And it leads to a kind of, it's problematic. It's problematic. The vaccine mandates are problematic, and they're leading to, look, we're losing a lot of firefighters. We're losing a lot of medical professionals by it, right? In China, vaccine mandates work fine because people trust the government. They trust the government, and they do it. But here, in a society where we've created so much distrust, where workers are viciously exploited by their employers, where the dignity of workers is not respected on the job, look, a lot of firefighters and city workers and a lot of people have come out and said, we don't like these mandates. And it leads to the situation where people who don't get vaccinated, this is what they're trying to do, okay? And this, I have to say this. I'm just going to go here now. This is what they're doing. Right? They have what they call the light switch effect, where if you question anything, click, they put you in the same category as people who believe in space aliens and lizard people and all of that. That's what they do. They have this light switch effect where you have to believe everything mainstream media says. You say one thing that goes against mainstream media, it's like, click, oh, you're in the light switches, you're in the other category. And what they're doing with the vaccine mandates and what they're doing with the stigmatization of people that are unvaccinated is they're setting up a situation where not only do they have the light switch effect where you're with them or against them, which is how it's turning into in the United States right now. You're with them or against them. I mean, the people that can't tell the difference between me and people on the right. People who think David Duke and Jimmy Dore are the same because they both don't like AOC. They're creating this light switch effect where everybody who questions the mainstream narrative in the United States is lumped together in this category of bad people. So there's that. But now, with the stigmatization of the non-vaccinated, they're creating a situation where those people, anybody who doesn't agree with the status quo, they say it's just the unvaccinated. No. It's anybody who goes against the mainstream narrative in the United States is a bad person who deserves to be punished by society. That's what they're setting up to do. You don't believe me? Fine. But, get on social media, listen to the liberal commentators, right? These people want non-vaccinated people to be fired from their jobs. They want non-vaccinated people to be, they practically, I'm waiting for one of these liberals to call for the death penalty for being unvaccinated. It's nuts, right? All these people that are not vaccinated are supposed to be the most vile, evil, awful human beings. They need to, it's like they're setting it up for like mass repression of them, right? And then they're associating people who don't want to be vaccinated. They're associating them with quote unquote conspiracy theories and dissident ideas. And they are setting the stage for a huge amount of political repression, right? With these vaccine mandates. They're setting the stage for, okay, you don't think that the United States is liberating the Cuban people from the evil dictators and communism by invading Cuba? Well, you're just like one of those unvaccinated people who is spreading conspiracy theories. We need to throw you in a prison camp and silence you. That's what they're setting up to do, right? They're trying to put all dissent against the status quo in the United States in the same category. And with the vaccine mandates, they are setting the stage for people to start accepting persecution of people, with dissident views. That's what they're doing. One of them submitted a bill that would allow health insurance to not cover you. And that's just the beginning. And it's very scary, right? I'm vaccinated. My wife is vaccinated, but, I don't agree with stigmatizing the unvaccinated people, making them the enemy, punishing them. I don't agree with that. And it's getting nuts. It's really getting nuts. Every business now, every private business, 184,000 of them in New York City, now they have a vaccine mandate that takes effect before the end of the year. This this is getting ridiculous, right? It's getting ridiculous. They're trying to create a subclass of people who aren't vaccinated, and that's not right. It's not right, and it's not smart. And it's about, it's not just about people who don't get vaccinated. They're setting the stage for this to be persecution of anyone who questions mainstream narratives. You should be allowed to question mainstream narratives. I don't agree with anti-vaxxers. Trust me, I've interviewed some of those folks, and they say they're wrong. Okay, just let me put it that way. They're wrong. But that said, by making them the target and making them the symbol of anyone who questions authority, they're setting the stage for a huge amount of political repression, right? And if the government of the United States had not mismanaged this from the beginning, and if the government of the United States hadn't lied over and over and over again, so many people wouldn't be unvaccinated, right? It's the little boy who cried wolf, as they say. All right. Why do Western economists keep predicting China's collapse? Because Western economists think China's capitalist, and they think of China like a capitalist economy. They don't understand that the Chinese government can just go, nope. Right? And there was a huge crash on the Chinese stock market in 2015. I wrote an article about this. There was a huge downturn on the Chinese stock market, and like a week later, it rebounded. Why? Well, the Communist Party threatened anyone who short sold on the Chinese stock market with arrest. They had an end on the selling of shares by state-run industries, and pretty soon the stock market was right back up to where it used to be. The Chinese government has the ability to control the means of production. The Chinese economy is centered around the government. And because of that, the economy is not subject to the irrational laws of the capitalist market. And they've been predicting China's economy is about to collapse, but every time China's economy slows down, the state just comes in and starts managing the economy and preventing it from slowing down, right? That's why in the Chinese media, there's a lot written about the government shutdowns in the United States. Because in China, if the government shut down, the country would fall apart. And the Chinese government doesn't shut down. And when they say we have a government shutdown in the United States, they read about this in the Chinese press. I know people over there, and they read about it in the Chinese press, and they say, what is wrong with you guys? Your government is shutting down? Right? Because in China, the government runs the economy. Most of the economy in China is centered around the state. Right? There is a market sector, but most of it's propped up by the state. It's all controlled and regulated by the state. Profits are not in command in China. And as a result of that, growth can continue because, of the abolishing the irrationality of capitalism. The capitalism that exists in China only exists because the Chinese Communist Party wants it to for their own convenience. So there you go. All right. Is there a compromise position between patriotic socialism and third worldism? Here's the thing. All right. So third worldism, the idea behind third worldism is that there is no first world proletariat, that the first world proletariat, or if it is, it's only a very, very small percentage of the population. There's no hope for any revolutionary movement in the first world. The position of patriotic socialism is that we need to go to the broad masses of people and get them to understand that socialism will make their lives better, and that we will apply socialism in a way that is unique to the country. What we are saying as patriotic socialists is called common sense, right? What we are saying is what the Communist Party has always said and still says. If you read their stuff, they just differentiate it. What we are saying is, is what, communists in every country in the world have always said. There is nothing remotely, new or groundbreaking about patriotic socialism. It is just common sense. It is just, we don't accept the synthetic left. That's what we don't accept. We don't accept the toxic anti-Marxist synthetic left narrative. How has China grown so quickly with avoiding bureaucratic arbitrage? All right. And that's all we're saying. So third worldism is the idea that, that there is no point in building a mass socialist movement in the United States because we're all a bunch of bought off Euro settlers. And, I don't know how you would reconcile those two positions. Now, if you're a third worldist and you want to liberate the third world from colonialism and oppression, patriotic socialists of my stripe would agree with you. Right? I mean, I've risked my life trying to bring aid to the people of Yemen. I am thoroughly anti-imperialist. And that's what I don't get when people attack patriotic socialism. They're like, oh, he's a supporter of imperialism. It's like, how am I a supporter of imperialism, folks? I work for Russian television. I have been to Iran. I risked my life trying to bring medical aid to Yemen. I monitor the elections in Nicaragua. I also monitored the elections in Venezuela in 2015. Like, how in the world do you think I'm a supporter of imperialism just because I say I'm patriotic? I think imperialism is bad for American workers. Like, what? Why do people not understand this? What are they missing here? And why is it that some like idiot on the internet who like, I hate Venezuela, it's not real socialism, and Russia is evil and it stole our, but he posts F the USA, and they're like, oh, he's an anti-imperialist. He agrees with the anti-imperialists on all the issues. He agrees with the imperialists on all the issues, but he posted an emoji of a burning American flag, so therefore this is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous, folks. Right? Anti-imperialism is about it's about where you stand. When there is a fight between the imperialists and the people resisting imperialism, are you on the side of the imperialists or not? What side are you on? Right? Are you with Russia against the U.S. imperialists? Are you with the U.S. imperialists against Russia? Are you with China against the U.S. imperialists? Or are you with the U.S. imperialists? Right? Are you with Iran against imperialism? Are you with the Bolivarian countries against imperialism? And in all of those cases, nobody is more with the countries that are resisting imperialism and resisting the domination of Wall Street monopolies and corporations than me, right? And my record is quite good on that issue. Okay, I'm not gonna like beat my chest but look at my bio. Okay, look at who I am. My record is quite good on those issues. So when people say because I advocate patriotic socialism, this means that I don't oppose imperialism, or I somehow don't recognize that the United States was founded on slavery, or I don't recognize, that's ridiculous. That is just ridiculous. But there you go. There you go. All right. Synthetic left in COVID culture. I mean, the isolation is a big part of the synthetic left. I'll just say that much. Part of the synthetic left, part of the isolation, it's when people are on their own, in their own apartment, watching social media, they're not in a group, they're not attending a rally with other people, they're not sitting down and listening to speeches, they're not part of an organization and bonding with other people. It's all just become this kind of performative social media thing. That's part of the COVID culture. That's part of the lockdown culture. Is people being isolated from each other, being cut off from each other, not going to events, not congregating, not, building communities, not learning to listen to other people. Everyone's just listening to everyone else over an electronic screen. Everyone's got their own little corner of the world. That, I think, has a lot to do with synthetic leftism, because synthetic leftism is very much focused on the individual. It's focused on your own feelings, your own isolation from society, etc. And so I think that's, synthetic leftism focuses on individualism. So there you go. Critiques of Stalin on the national question. Well, his definition of a nation might be a little bit narrow. Right? I mean, he's very specific about what a nation is. Well, a nation is this, a nation is this, a nation is this. And, not all nations necessarily fit the category, right? For example, black people in the United States, yes, there is a territory in the South, there's the Black Belt, but then there's a lot of parts of the United States, a lot of urban centers in the United States that are overwhelmingly black that are not a common territory. They're, scattered, they're like dispersed, right? Black people in the United States constitute a nation if you look at Lenin's definition or at Stalin's definition of a nation, but not exactly, right? Do black people in the United States have their own language? Technically, no, right? They speak English, but there is their own dialect, right? I mean, and there is African American English, right? That people have talked about, right? So it's like, the definition of what a nation is, according to Stalin, is a bit rigid, it's hard to define a nation strictly according to that definition. A common territory, not exactly, right? And what constitutes a common territory? What if the common territory is dispersed throughout the country? What if there's black neighborhoods in major cities throughout the United States? There's a common territory in that neighborhood, but it's not all the black people in one area, right? That's what is a nation, right? What is a nation, right? They talk about how, like, when France is a colonizer country, there are a lot of African people in France. But a lot of those African people in France are not from the same countries. But yet, because they have moved to France, they're from the countries that France has colonized. They live together, but one guy might be from Senegal, and one guy might be from I don't know, from different countries, and one guy might be from Senegal, that was colonized by France, and another guy, might be from the Ivory Coast and all of that, but they're crammed together in France. Like, do they constitute a new nation of Africans in France? Or, I mean, or is they just oppressed it starts to ask a question, Marxist view of aesthetics. It starts to ask a question. So there you go. All right. All right. How did China grow so quickly without having bureaucratic? I don't know. They continue to grow, and they do have bureaucratic problems in China. I mean, from what I understand, there is a lot of bureaucracy in China, and that is one of the problems. That's why Xi Jinping talked about, the mass line campaign. There are big problems with bureaucracy in China, very, very big problems. So, that's one of the things they're trying to address. The problem of bureaucracy is a problem that hangs over every socialist society. Trotsky, I believe he talked about how, the bureaucracy is if you have a shortage of food and you have to ration the food, there's going to be a line to get food. But then you have to have a guard who guards the line to make sure that no one takes any more food than anybody else. But that guard is going to demand a bigger slice of food because he takes on the responsibility of being the guard. He's not just one of the people in the line. And that's the basis of bureaucracy. Then whenever you're building socialism, on the basis of scarcity, when you don't have a vast amount of abundance, right? When you're not moving toward communism, when you have scarcity in society, you're going to, out of necessity, have a bureaucracy. And that, the bureaucracy has to be controlled. How do you control the bureaucracy? Make sure the bureaucracy doesn't become the new ruling class, right? And there's ways of doing it, right? And that, that the Cultural Revolution in China was an attempt to control the bureaucracy. And the Stalin's purges were an attempt to control the bureaucracy. And nowadays in socialist countries, the main way they control the bureaucracy is by having a market sector. People who want to get rich go into the market sector. They go start companies. The way the bureaucracy is only for those loyal to the revolution. It's a core of people that are dedicated to the principles that aren't going to get rich necessarily. They're not going to become super wealthy through being bureaucrats. The bureaucracy is about people who are dedicated to the principles of the revolution. So there you go. But yes, bureaucracy is a problem in China, just like it's a problem in every socialist country. But there you go. All right, Marxist aesthetics. Marxist aesthetics. What is the Marxist view of aesthetics? Well, aesthetics is appearance, right? Clothing, color schemes, tone of voice. It's the focus on the tone setting. It's art. It's these things. And this is a fixation of the synthetic left, right? They talk about the fascist aesthetic. That's a big thing from Susan Sontag. The fascist aesthetic, fascinating fascism. And it misses the point. Aesthetics are a reflection of something else, right? The aesthetics of Mussolini's Italy, for example, were very, quote unquote, optimistic. It was all, futurism. It was about science fiction, right? Go read, I don't even know what that means. Go and read the, what do you call it? The Futurist Manifesto by one of the fascist, the futurists, right? It's all, speed is the future, and it's kind of ultra masculine, but it's about speed and and there's a lot that I think a lot of leftists would agree with in the Futurist Manifesto. But at the end of the day, all of that was used. It was used for fascism, for persecution, right? The aesthetics that they were using, ultimately served fascism. Fascism isn't an aesthetic. It's what you do. It's what you do. It's what you do. Fascism is not what you say. It's what you do, right? And the same goes for, aesthetics. Aesthetics at the end of the day they're a means to an end, right? If you want to build a mass political movement of some type, you're going to have to obviously appeal to people. And you're going to have symbols that appeal to people. You're going to have religious ideas. You're going to have, not religious ideas, but, concepts that appeal to people. If you're building a mass movement, you're going to have some type of aesthetics. I mean, what do you think the Democratic National Convention is? What do you think the Republican Convention is? Right? It's people getting up there. It's their unleashing emotions, political rhetoric, flags, symbols, balloons, etc. That is the nature of aesthetics, right? And a lot of things that we associate, a lot of the aesthetics of fascism were stolen from communism. For example, communists, we have our salute, the fist. Right? Well, fascists, they have their salute, obviously. You know, I've talked about this on many streams that aesthetics are how you build a movement, right? You need to have aesthetics of some kind if you build a movement, and you have to experiment what are effective. Some aesthetics are more effective than others, but aesthetics don't tell the whole story. The movement is about what the movement achieves and what it does. It's not about how people dress. You could have people who wore the most vile costume politically, but they did good things and they would be progressive. You could have people who dressed really, really well and used amazing rhetoric, but they committed horrendous atrocities and murdered people. Fascism is about what you do. It's about what you do. It's not about what you say, right? You know, fascism is a mass movement of violence and terror to try and stabilize capitalism. I talk about this in the BreadTube book. In the book BreadTube Serves Imperialism, I have a whole chapter about fascism and about how the BreadTubers think fascism is an aesthetic, when in reality fascism is an effort to save capitalism with mass violence and terror, and that it has many different aesthetics. The Ku Klux Klan of the United States and the aftermath of the Civil War was fascist, but its aesthetics were completely different than the Nazis. You can talk about Mussolini and, like I said, the futurist aesthetics of the early Italian fascists. But all of these fascists, while they had different aesthetics, they all did the same thing: mass violence and terror to stabilize capitalism. And that's the nature. That is the nature of fascism. Fascism is not about aesthetics; it's about what you do. I talk about Superman. There's an episode of Superman where somebody goes around in a Superman costume and does bad things, and that causes problems for Superman. Well, that's kind of like what fascism is. Sometimes fascists talk about a revolution. Sometimes they talk about organizing the working class. But what they do, not what they say, not how they dress, not the way they speak, but what they do is fundamentally different than what communists do. And that's why I would argue there is a fascist streak in the synthetic left. Right? The fact that they go around trying to, destroy the lives of people that are anti-imperialist, that's what fascists do. Fascists went around murdering communists, and the synthetic left, that's what they're trying to do. They want to label all communists Nazis so that it's okay to violently attack them on the street. That's pretty fascist. Right? The synthetic left, what do? They unleash chaos and instability. Well, that's what fascists did, right? Fascists, the street gangs, the stormtroopers, that's what they did. They unleash chaos and instability. So there is a fascist streak to the synthetic left, and the way they don't care about ideology. It's all about action. It's about get 'em, action, right? The way that they label, you're either with them or against them, right? There's no middle ground, right? Because I just said on here I oppose vaccine mandates, I'm the same as, the Grand Wizard of the KKK, according to these people. No nuance. You're either with them or against them, and the response is violence. Get 'em, chaos. They don't want to talk. They don't want to understand things. There's no logic. It's just this emotional explosion of emotions followed by violence, and you're either with them or against them. All that's very fascist. There's a whiff of fascism coming from the synthetic left, right? And the way they want to stigmatize people who don't agree with them and take away their rights. The way that they blame average people for the problems. They don't blame the capitalist power structure. It's all average people who just aren't woke enough, right? That's very fascist, right? And we need to just start punishing people. The solution is mass punishment, right? If we just start punishing people on a mass level, that'll solve things. That's very fascist as well, right? Mass movement of violence and terror to stabilize capitalism. There's a lot of fascist smelling stuff in the synthetic left. Now, I'm not at the point that I would say that they are full-on fascists, but there you go. Does classical Soviet communist ideology influence Putin's political philosophy? Of course it does. Of course. Putin himself has said that on many occasions. He's not a communist. He's not a Marxist by any means. And he makes that clear. But if you read Putin, he talks about how much, the Communist Party's teachings were an influence on him, how much Lenin and the Bolsheviks were an impact, how the fall of the Soviet Union was a turning point in his life. How could any contemporary Russian leader not be heavily influenced by the legacy of the Soviet Union? But that said, Putin, is an Orthodox Christian. Putin has, very much said he doesn't believe in Marxism and communism. But yes, there's definitely an influence. He talks about this. There was debate about Lenin. I think, he's criticized. Putin has criticized Lenin many times for Lenin's position on the national question and argued that weakened the Soviet Union by playing nationalities against each other. And after he did that, the Communist Party of Russia was very angry that he'd done that. So then he came out and he said some of the good things that he thought that he pulled from Lenin. And you can read those speeches and those articles on Sputnik News where he says that he felt, Lenin and the Bolsheviks, there was some overlap between Christianity and communism. You can go read what Putin has said. And Putin's views are Putin's views, right? And I'm not a Putinist, right? I don't have Putin's views. I have my own views. But I mean, yes, to say that there wasn't an influence of Soviet ideology on Putin, there's an influence. I mean, he doesn't agree with Soviet ideology, but yes, there's an influence. You can bet there's an influence. Absolutely. Absolutely, there's an influence. Is this the same type of fascism that is vaguely anti-capitalist, but also highly aristocratic and stratocratic? I don't know what you're talking about there, Jay Grimes. I mean, fascism is about reinforcing social hierarchies. That's a big part of fascism. Mass violence, destruction, and terror reinforcing social hierarchies. There's a conservatism to fascism usually, but not always, right? I mean, Italian fascism did not have the conservative, elements as exaggerated, right? Yeah, I mean, Italian fascism, when it began, had a very, very liberal and futurist aesthetic to it, but it didn't matter. It's what they do. It's what you do that defines fascism, not what you say. All right, folks. On that note, I am going to end the stream for tonight. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Good night.